So I decided for this week and next week's episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Explained that I'd do something a little different and something I've never done on the channel before, which is tier lists or tier rankings, where I'm just going to kind of order characters in whether an S, an A, a B, a C, or a D, or whatever. So this week I'm going to do kind of the heroes or the agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and then next week I'm just going to do like the antagonists and the villains and stuff like that. But I've got some sort of criterias that I used to who counts to get on this list and who didn't. Like for me, if a character's on this list or if a character is included here, it's somebody who at least had sort of an impact on the show, because there's a lot of characters and agents who were in the show who got, barely anything to do, and they were like, they had like a second name and they were like in the background for a lot of time. They don't really count for me. These characters had to have some sort of an impact or something that made them slightly memorable. I've also got some kind of weird criteria where like I've got Grant Ward on here, but I'm only counting Grant Ward for the first 16 and a half episodes of season 1. Once he turns to being Hydra and once the big twist happens, he's not really a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent anymore. So from then on, he doesn't count. So when I'm talking about him on here, I can't use the later stuff when I'm talking about him. Similarly, I've got John Garrett. I can only count Garrett for when he was not a villain, like when we saw him as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent or whatever. There's also for sure some characters I'm forgetting, so if I forgot anybody major, let me know. But I think I got mostly everyone. They had to have appeared on the show to get in here, so like they had to have appeared on the show as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent to get in here. So like I've got Maria Hill on here, I've got Nick Fury, I've got Jasper Sitwell, I've got Peggy Carter, I've got Daniel Souza, because they were all like SSR or S.H.I.E.L.D. agents when they appeared on the show, whereas there's characters who were in the movies who were S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, they're not on here because they weren't in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Anyway, a lot of these characters I'm probably just gonna get through pretty quickly. There's some of them I don't have a lot to say on. I think the main characters are kind of the only ones I'm going to talk about for an extended period of time. A lot of them are just going to be like, yeah, let's put them here, let's put them there. So let's kind of talk about these characters. I'll probably leave a lot of the big people to the end. So let's start off with some of the smaller characters. Okay, let's pick an easy one with Lincoln. So yeah, let's start with Lincoln. So I think it's a weird character for me. I think season 3 is the one season of the show that doesn't get better for me. I feel like every other season of the show, when I'm rewatching it, something makes it better for me. Season 3 kind of always sticks in this weird area of like, it somehow gets a little worse every time I see it, because I think season 3 felt like they were setting a lot of things up that didn't go anywhere, and setting a lot of things like character-wise up that didn't go anywhere. And Lincoln is kind of a symptom of this, where I feel like the character is only there for plot purposes, where he doesn't have a lot behind him per se, where he's there to be annoying and sort of not in a villain role, but like a foil to some of the things going on with the main Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. characters. And then at the very end of the season, they flip him so that he gets a really good death scene or gets to go out on top or whatever. I kind of hate when shows do that, when they have a character and out of nowhere they change how they have been just so that they can get a really good death scene or like a redemption death scene. That never really works for me or makes the character better. It just makes me kind of like, I also realized in this picture cut his head off. So I'm assuming this is Lincoln. That is his outfit from season 3, right? Anyway, I would probably put Lincoln in like a C maybe. He's like the one main character I think I'd put that low, but like I didn't think he was an interesting character. I thought he was there to be a love interest for Daisy, and then he was there to be the person that Hive killed because they needed somebody for Hive to kill, and they didn't want to kill off any of the bigger characters, so pick Lincoln. Sorry, Lincoln, but yeah, you're a C. Next up, let's go with Isabel Hartley. So Isabel was the most memorable thing about her character is that she's played by Lucy Lawless. If you don't remember, she was in the very first episode of season 2, as well as episode 14, I think. I can't remember what episode 14 or 15 of season 2 was, the flashback episode where we saw what happened to Robert Gonzalez's faction during the S.H.I.E.L.D. or during the Hydra uprising. But yeah, the impact her character made is completely down to the fact she was played by Lucy Lawless. She was an interesting enough character for the time we saw her. I would have liked to have seen a lot more of her. She seemed cool. She was kind of in this era where we got a lot of new characters like Hunter, Idaho, Bobby, Mac, a lot of these season 2 characters, and she was one of the ones that they kind of killed off for a bit of an impact, dealing with Carl Creel. I would put her, I don't know. See, it's hard when characters barely get anything. And I feel like she was kind of just there, similar to Lincoln, for like death shock plot purposes, where it's like you've got a big actress like Lucy Lawless and you're going to kill her off straight away. What else are they going to do this season? But I don't think, I don't know. The thing is about Lincoln, I actively disliked parts of Lincoln's character. I didn't dislike any parts of Isabel Hartley, but that's just down to the fact she was barely in the show. So I think it's unfair to put her above Lincoln because she didn't get that much. But you know what I'm going to do? I'd say she's a low B. A low B. Next up, I'm just going to say the Koenigs. I'm putting them all in one person here. Like LT, Eric, all of them. They're just in the one picture here. Let's assume that whenever I'm ranking him, you know, let's do them next. But I'm counting all the Koenigs at once. The Koenigs, they've been part of the DNA of the show for the entire 7-year run. We had the 1930s Koenig in season 7. We had Eric in season 1. So they've really been there for the entire course of the show. They're kind of built into the DNA of the show. Don't think they ever reached like S levels for me, but they were always enjoyable when they showed up. I feel like they used the Koenigs just the right amount, where it really easily could have gotten too much or gotten annoying. But I think that they rightfully only really brought them in every 5-6 episodes or so, and then when they would be around, they'd only stick around for 2 or 3 episodes, and then they'd be gone again for a while. So they never really got annoying. There was that one episode in season 4, Hot Potato Soup, I believe it's called, which was focused on like LT and all the Koenigs. That was the one time I felt they got annoying, but that's because the entire episode was built around them, and thankfully that's the only time they did that. I feel like lesser shows would have done an episode like that every season, where they're like, let's just do a Koenig episode every season, and people don't really want to see that. So where would I put him? Or them, I guess. Sorry, I keep saying him because I'm looking at the picture. But I would probably put the Koenigs in an A. Like, they're not like S level for me, but I think they're enjoyable whenever they show up. Then never really actively dislike them. I feel like as a criteria for low C and D is like, if I actively dislike the character, that's where they go. D's probably going to be for like extremely forgettable people too. Like Isabel Hartley, she was not forgettable. You know, she was in 2 episodes of the whole show, but she made a bit of an impact. Let's just go over Gonzalez's faction next. This guy here, Agent Oliver, I think his name is. He was easily the most forgettable of all of Gonzalez's faction. So I would probably put him in just a D, because I feel like there is zero impact on his character. I can't even remember what happened to him, whether it was when the Inhumans got on board. Did he die? Was it around then? I don't know. He was there and then he wasn't. Where is Kirk Acevedo's character, who I believe is called Tomas Calderon? Is that his name? Where did I even put him? There he is. The most memorable thing about him is that, similar to Isabel Hartley, is that he's played by Kirk Acevedo, who is a character actor who's in like most of my favorite shows, so it's hard not to be excited when he shows up, like Band of Brothers, Arrow, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Oz, The Walking Dead, even for a little bit. Like, he's kind of just in everything. But the thing is, though, when he shows up, you kind of know he's going to be playing an asshole-style character, and I did kind of actively hate him because he was pursuing Daisy so much and trying to get Daisy, or Sky at the time, I guess she was still sort of called, but you know, trying to get her, capture, stuff like that. That kind of made me dislike him, so I'd probably put him in a C. Anne Weaver, she wasn't just from Gonzalez's faction, she was also in season 1 very briefly during some of the Fitz Simmons stuff. I don't feel like her I mean, she made more of an impact than a lot of the smaller characters did, but I didn't actively dislike her either, but I don't think I'd put her on like the level of Isabel Hartley. You know what? She'd probably be like a high C. I'll say a high C. I'll put her there for like a high C. You know what? That's what it's going to be. They're going to be ordered in like, not favoritism, but in terms of like how high up on that letter grade they are. Who we got Robert Gonzalez himself, who's similar to Kirk and Lucy Lawless. The most memorable thing about him for me was the actor that played him. Edward Olmos, I think his name is. Known from Battlestar Galactica, where he played Commander Adama. Fantastic in it. And he was in Mayans MC for a bit as well, and some other stuff. I thought he was an interesting character. I thought he was... He had better intentions than I think a lot of his faction did, whereas like Oliver or Weaver or Tomas kind of were just sort of there to be in sort of antagonistic roles, whereas like, well, Gonzalez was sort of an antagonist. He was clearly trying to do the right thing at the end of season 2 when he went to Jiaying, and she turned on him, and she took the Inhumans and she turned on him, but he was trying to do the right thing at the end. And I think that probably puts him in like a high B. I think that's where he deserves to be, kind of, because he's not exactly an A character. If we had more of him, maybe he'd be an A character, but what we saw of him was really compelling and really interesting, to the point where I would have really wanted to see more of him. Since we're on sort of the season 2 characters, I'll do Idaho next, who is another character who joined up during the Hunter Isabel Hartley stuff. And his whole point was kind of just to be like a death character, I think, like a character to push Hunter to want to do more things, similar to Isabel Hartley's character. But he didn't leave nearly as much of an impact as Hartley did. I'd put him in like a mid-tier C, I'd say. I'd probably put him between Lincoln and Tomas. Let's do the season 6 characters next, the new ones, because I don't know, maybe it's just me. I feel like all the season 6 characters just sort of like blended together for me, where it was kind of hard to remember who is who. So what we got, like Fox, we got Diaz, we got was that Trevor Khan, I think. Why is Felix Blake getting up top there? And then we had this guy here who was Keller. That was his name, Keller. So that's the thing. Like, these season 6 characters, I keep forgetting their names. I'm like, who was who? Fox had the least amount of impact of all of them. I'd put him in like a mid D, probably. Keller gave a bit more impact than the rest of them, mainly because of his plot with Yo-Yo. But he was also kind of uninteresting in his own way. He felt sort of like a generic version of season 1 Grant Ward, in a way, where he had that sort of same, like, the masculine hero sort of agent, that his whole thing is that he's sort of like an 80s action movie hero, and he doesn't really have a lot else to him besides that. I'd probably put him in like a mid C. Diaz, she didn't leave much of an impact on me. I'd probably put her below Keller. And then Trevor Khan, he left probably the most impact, I think, because of that whole thing with Deke, where he was trying to save Deke for a bit in episode 3 or episode 4. I can't remember which was Code Yellow and which was Fear and Loathing on the Planet Kitson. I think episode 3 was Fear and Loathing and episode 4 was Code Yellow. But he would also be a C. I think I'd put him like there. I don't know. Season 6, it's not one of my favorite seasons. I think it's an all right season, but a lot of the new characters introduced, they don't stand up at all to the older characters. Like, it's kind of a similar thing when the season 2 characters were introduced. Well, no, I mean, I wouldn't even say that. Like Mac, Bobby, and Hunter, they immediately fit in with the new cast. You kind of felt that they immediately had the charisma and the character dynamics were working. I never felt that about the season 6 characters. I thought that they sort of just didn't work at all. Let's do some of the season 1 agents next. So we'll move Hill up there. Where is he? There he is. Felix Blake, I would give a low C. I mean, I don't really have much to say to him. He was in season 1 for a bit. I like the actor. He was in Star Trek Voyager. I don't know. He just didn't really do a whole lot. Sitwell, I hate Sitwell so much. I think Sitwell is just an annoying character. He was annoying in Winter Soldier. He was annoying in Thor. He's annoying in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and he got what he deserved. So I'm gonna put him in like lowest D. Victoria Hand was a really cool character. I know she was much more important in the comics than she is in the show. But I thought what they did with her was really cool, where you could never really tell where her allegiances lie. And then by the time you found out where they were, it was too late. I'd put her in like high A, put her just below the Koenigs, I think. She was a really, really enjoyable character. Now, see, Maria Hill and Nick Fury, I can only use their Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. episodes. But what's easy about Maria Hill is that I think her best MCU stuff is in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I think she's better in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. than she is in any of the movies or in Secret Invasion. And I'd give her a lowish A, I think, for that. I think she's always really enjoyable. I love her dynamic with Coulson towards the end of season 1 when Talbot's coming in and she's siding with him over the US military and stuff like that. That's really enjoyable. Fury also, I mean, he only gets 2 episodes in the entire show. One of them is a glorified cameo. I can't really put him in S just because he was in so little of the show, but I think he deserves like the highest A, maybe, just because of that. The season 1 finale was so good with him. Who other smaller characters do we have? We have Joey from season 3. Also did not leave much of an impact with me, unfortunately. But I wouldn't give him like, I don't know. I can't put him higher than Lincoln, I think, because Lincoln got so much more than him. Probably put Trevor higher than him. I'm surprised Joey never came back. I feel like he would have worked pretty well if they'd brought him back at various points in the show, kind of as we went on and we moved more into like superhuman stuff, because right as when we're digging into the Inhumans in season 3 is when they use him up and don't use him anymore. They kind of just write him out, which makes sense. He had a life. Can't remember whether he was married or was just a boyfriend he had at the time, but I think he would have been a cool character if we saw more of him. I'd put him between like Trevor and Idaho, I think. Who else we got who's not like a main character? I guess Garrett we can do next. Garrett was, I mean, it's hard to feel like I can make a difference in my head between pre-Hydra Grant and post-Hydra Grant. With Garrett, I feel differently. I feel like it's much harder to really differentiate the two, because even when he's in as an agent, even when he's just in normal like season 1 agent mode, he still sort of plays it off villainously, which I mean that's just a credit to the actor who's fantastic. But I think it makes it hard to kind of talk about him in a non-antagonistic role, because that was the whole point where he was the main villain. But he was good. I'd put him in a high B, I think. Okay, next up we'll do Mike Peterson Deadlock, who was really fun when we had him. He was sort of in a villainous role for season 1 for a while, but then he came back in season 2 and in season 5 as pretty much a full-on agent. He was one of the few agents to pick up the call when it got sent out in the 100th episode, so that makes him a pretty good S.H.I.E.L.D. agent in my opinion. I'd put him in like a high B, kind of just above Garrett, I think. We'll do Davis and Piper next. I'll just get out of the way. I don't know. I think Davis is a much more memorable character than Piper was, mainly because Davis is such a wild card, you know? Like, there's that moment in the season 4 finale where they're fighting Ada, and he just goes over and just puts like 2 headshots in Ada's head and then walks away, and then Ada like revives herself and starts running at him, and it's just, he was cold. he was a bit of a badass in a way that they would always like talk about the crazy stuff he did off screen that we'd never see. And I just thought that made him such an interesting mystery character. I think I've got to put him in an A because of that. I think, I'd put him in a low A, but he was just a really interesting character. Now, in contrast to that, I did not think that Piper was ever nearly as interesting as Davis. I feel like just because Piper became one of those sort of named background characters that moved up the ranks similar to Davis did, they thought that the two characters paired together pretty well, and just to keep both of them on the show rather than just keeping Davis on the show. But to be honest, I never felt like Piper was nearly as interesting or had nearly as much going on character-wise as Davis did. I feel like Davis just... I feel like the writers just liked writing for Davis more than they did for Piper, because it felt like Piper was kind of just there a lot of the time, or there to kind of give like a, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Sort of exposition-y dialogue, whereas Davis would like sometimes actually have stuff to say. Now, Piper did get more to do in season 6 when we started going off into space with Daisy and Simmons, but I think by then it already sort of felt like we were filling in a lot of new character spots with a lot of the season 6 characters coming in, and she didn't really, I mean, she's better than the season 6 characters, but I don't know by much. I'd probably put her in like a mid-ish C, I think. Is that all? All right, we'll do Cora next. Cora from season 7, because she technically was a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent at the end of season 7, which maybe Flint should have been included on here, actually, if we're doing that, which I completely forgot about Flint. But Cora, I don't know. I didn't like her in season 7, but I think that stems more from the fact that I didn't really like season 7's villains at all. Nathaniel Malik, I thought, was a terrible final season villain. I thought the Chronicoms and all that sort of stuff was a really underwhelming way for the show to end. Like, I think season 7's a good season, but I think a lot of what makes season 7 good is the one-off episodes and the stuff with the main characters. I think every time we'd focus on the villains, the season was like 20% worse. So Cora was unfortunately a symptom of that, where she was just not an interesting villain, I felt like. So I'd probably put her in like a lowish C. I don't think she's kind of as bad as a D or anything like that, but I think she just, if the show went on longer, she could have gotten more to do, but we never see that far ahead, unfortunately. Okay, next up, let's do Peggy Carter, who... so we kind of want to talk about like season 2 Peggy Carter, when her her flashback scenes in season 2 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. when she's kind of investigating Whitehall and all that sort of stuff. I think just based off of that probably gets her like a mid-ish B. I don't think I'd put her on an A or an S because a lot of her best stuff comes from the movies and from her own show, and we don't really see a lot of that in here. I mean, the opening scene of season 2 where she comes in to arrest Whitehall is really fun and really badass, but outside of that, she doesn't really get a super big amount to do. Sousa, on the contrast, gets a lot of season 7 to be really cool, and I really enjoyed his character. I thought he was better in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. than he was in Agent Carter. I thought pairing him with Daisy and pairing him with Mac and stuff like that made them do some really cool stuff. I loved like Simmons fangirling about Peggy Carter and Sousa in his first episode of the season. I think he was a really fun character. I'd put him in like a super high A. He's one character I'd love to see come back in the Agents of, in just the wider MCU at some point or in some form. I think that would be really fun. Okay, now we're kind of getting into like the main agents, like a lot of the characters who were in full seasons or had full things to do and were integral parts of their show. So let's kind of just go off of, I guess, the least important out of these, or who had the lesser amount of screen time compared to everyone else, and leave like the main guys to the very end. So I guess then you'd probably go after that, maybe Bobby, Lance, Deke after that, then Yo-Yo, Mac, Coulson at the end, Daisy second last, Simmons together, May probably goes after Daisy. Yeah, that seems pretty consistent with me with how much screen time a lot of these characters had. Trip, great character. I really liked him. First showed up as sort of Garrett's right-hand man. And wow, I'm just realizing we've got no S's yet. That makes me sound like an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. hater, but I feel like a lot of these characters are going to be an S anyway. So yeah, Trip, great character. I don't feel like he got enough to do as a lot of the other characters did, but I mean, I'm going to put him in S just because he tried to save Daisy. That crazy kick he did to try and kick the Terrigen crystals, and he gets like frozen or solidified or whatever. He gets into the Terrigen husk, and it turns out he's not in human rip. But yeah, no, that he gets an S just for that kick alone because it was crazy. Next up, Jeffrey Mace. I'm also putting Mace in an S. I don't know if I've already talked about Mace on this channel. I made like a top 10 Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. characters a while back, and I think Mace was on that list. I love Mace. I think he's a great character. I know we're not counting framework stuff in this video, but he's so badass as the Patriot in the framework, and I'm going to count his sacrifice in the framework as what he would have done in real life anyway. We slowly see him getting better and more interesting throughout season 4. We see him kind of growing to learn himself. There's that moment where he's captured by the Superior, and he's put in his cell, and these people are all brought in to beat him up, and he's just trying to fight them off. He was a badass character. I really enjoyed Mace. Next up is season 1 Grant Ward. Now, I've been forever saying Grant Ward's one of the most interesting MCU characters, and one of my favorite MCU characters, and one of my favorite Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. characters, just because of the layers to him and what they do with him. But I think in season 1, he was very clearly supposed to come off as a boring, generic action hero. A lot of the more interesting parts of his character don't come out until the Hydra turn, which is the point. You're not supposed to suspect anything about his character. You're just supposed to think he's a boring, generic guy until they do the twist. But that unfortunately means that when you're watching him in season 1, he's not super interesting. He's kind of like your typical action hero who fools around with May, fools around with Skye, and it starts to pal around a bit with Fitz and Simmons a little bit. But yeah, there's not a lot to him until you really get the reveal of who he is. So because of that, I'd put him in a low A maybe. I think I'd put him above Davis. But yeah, I think he the best things about Grant Ward are when he turns. So that means that he can't really go into an S or higher than that. But I think he is fun to watch in season 1, which is why he gets at least an A. Okay, next up, Bobby Morse. So I will just say straight off the bat, I don't think Bobby is as enjoyable as Hunter is. I think Bobby gets some cool stuff to do, and I think she's really enjoyable in the later parts of season 2, especially when she starts to like, I don't know, when a lot of like stuff about her past comes out in her relation to Kara and Agent 33 and all that, which I will say Agent 33 is not on this list because I was thinking about her and I was like, we never actually see her as a SHIELD agent. As soon as we meet her, she's already being brainwashed by Hydra, and we don't really see what she was like as a SHIELD agent. But if we'd saw her as a proper SHIELD agent at any point, she for sure would be on this list. But in terms of Bobby, I think the more we learn about her past, the more interesting the character gets. But I think, I don't know, I love the actress, Adrienne Palicki. She's great. I don't know, I don't think I'd put her in S, but I think a high A is pretty reasonable. I think she's a cool character. She's a badass character. But I feel like sometimes when she comes in, it feels like she's doing the same role that May has on the show. And then other times it feels like she's sort of filling the gap from who Ward was in season 1 before his turn. And I feel like that's sort of a disservice to her character, is that when she shows up, it feels like she's just filling gaps of other characters or doing the same thing as other characters rather than completely standing on her own. So I'd probably put her a high A. I'd put her above Fury for sure, because we barely saw Fury. Next up is Hunter. I'm a big Hunter fan. I think Hunter's a really fun character. I think he's enjoyable. And I think what makes Hunter an S character for me is that Hunter, come on, get up there. Is that he's just a different character. Like, his attitude, his way of talking, his way of dealing with situations is immediately extremely different to everyone else on the show at that point. Like, he is an extremely different character in most ways. And I think that that's what makes him fascinating and what makes him great. And I think even like once he was written off the show in season 3, it never really felt like a character took over from what his specific role was in the show. And I think in season 5, when he came back for the one episode with Fitz, it is never more apparent than there that he is a very specific, unique character that no one else on the show has matched to that point, and no one on the show has matched since. Like, he's just a cool character. And it doesn't feel like he's even filling in the Ward spot either, because he's got his own code. He really cares about his friends, which I think is something that like makes him different than a lot of the other agent characters, is that Lance sure is in it for the money, but at the end of the day, he cares about his friends and he wants them to be, I don't know, he wants them to be alive and to be well and stuff like that. And then he comes back to help Coulson in mid-season 2, and that's one of my favorite little mini arcs in the show is Coulson, Lance, and Fitz off doing their thing outside of everyone else. It's really fun. I think Lance for sure is an S character. Next up is Deke. I don't know. I don't really know how the fandom feels on Deke. I've never been a huge Deke fan. I think he's fun. I think he's a funny character. I laugh a lot of the times when he's doing stuff. I think in season 5, in the lighthouse stuff, he was pretty interesting. But I don't know. He never really did a whole lot for me personally. I think he kind of was just came in as comic relief, as a bit of jokes, had a bit of levity to the show, because season 5 is probably the darkest season of the show tone wise, and the seriousness and of what the characters are dealing with. So yeah, I'd probably put him in like a mid B. Unfortunately, I don't think he's anywhere close to a lot of the other main characters. So I'd put him, I'd put him above Carter. Nah, I don't think I would. Yeah, I'd put him there. I'd put him between Carter and Gonzalez, which feels a bit mean because he is the lowest main character, I think. Well, now we're talking about Elena, Yo-Yo, and I don't know. Honestly, I think Elena was the least interesting of the sort of season 3 onwards new characters in terms of like main characters. I think Elena, she got Slingshot, which was a really cool like mini group of episodes, and she got a bit of backstory in season 3 and a little bit of backstory then in season 7 as well. But I do think that in terms of the characters of the main cast, she always felt the least interesting. She felt like they didn't exactly have a lot to do with her due to the nature of her powers. It meant that she could really get a lot of things done immediately, which that's just a speedster thing, is like you've got to find ways to take away their powers, because you know they'll finish most situations before they become a situation. But I don't know, I think Elena unfortunately doesn't stack up to a lot of the other cast members, because it sometimes feel like the writers use Elena as a plot device to drive other characters apart. Like, think of season 5, for example. where she was really used as sort of this character to bring up the arguments and to cause conflict among the cast, which understandably due to what we saw with her in the lighthouse in the future. But I think that unfortunately does a disservice to her character, where sometimes it feels like she's more of a plot device than she is her own fully fleshed and fully realized character. So I don't know. I think I'd probably put her in like a low A. Whereas like she's not anywhere near S, but she's definitely not like a B or below. Put her above Davis, put her above Season 1 Ward. Don't know if I'd put her above Hill or not. Yeah, I'd put her above Hill. I'd put her like between I'd put her between the Canings in hand, I think, where she's like a mid to low A, where she can be really good when they actually use her well. She's really enjoyable, but a lot of the time it does feel like they don't know what to do with her. Next up is Mac, who, I mean, he gets an S just because of his shotgun axe, I think. Like, I'm super biased towards Lance. I think Lance is like one of my favorite characters in like anything ever. So I put him like just under Lance just because of how much I enjoy watching Hunter. But Mac with his shotgun axe, with his friendship with Turbo, aka Fitz, a lot of that stuff is really enjoyable. I think Mac is one of the most badass characters on the show. He's one of the most fun to watch. When he whips out that shotgun axe in the season 3 finale and he's like, made this damn thing for something, is just so enjoyable. It's one of the best moments of the show. And his moment in the season 2 finale where Gordon's like, who the hell are you? And he's like, I'm the guy who kills Gordon. It's so good. It's so good. It's so good. I mean, Mac, what else can you say? I will say I think all of these characters are going to go in S, these final characters. Simmons, yeah, I don't think she's as interesting sometimes as Fitz, but I think there's a lot to her character. Season 3, when she's on Maveth, is so good. It's probably her best arc in the show. She gets a lot of cool stuff like that, as well as that in late season 4 when she goes into the framework. She's super interesting. I think that she's one of her paired with Fitz is probably my favorite like relationship, will they won't they thing in all of television. I think that they managed to hold the two characters throughout that whole show super well and like never overplay their cards, and they use it when necessary. And I think that she starts out as kind of your typical scientisty character, and she grows so much more than that. And I think, you know, she's one of the characters I'd love to see return to the MCU. I think that her even if she just comes back without Fitz, I think would be super enjoyable, because I think she is a character that, while in season 1 it might have felt like maybe her and Fitz are so tied together you can't do one without the other, season 2 then immediately shows that both characters can stand on their own by having Fitz with his brain damage and then having her off undercover in Hydra. And I think, yeah, she's just a really great character. Speaking of Fitz, putting him right there in the first place spot. May, Daisy, Phil, sorry, none of you are going to be overtaking Fitz's spot. That's where he belongs. That's where he goes, because he is the best character on the show. Not even just that, I'd put him alongside Netflix Matt Murdock, Netflix Jessica Jones as like the best MCU character. Like the best. It's crazy that the movies haven't been able to beat some of the TV characters from 2013, 2012, 2014, 2015 sort of thing. But that's just how good the writing for Fitz is throughout the whole show. In season 1, seems like he's the typical nerdy character who's going to give you some comic relief sometimes. You know, he's going to be a bit of a comedic character. He's going to be a bit of he's not an idiot, but he's a bit of like a nerd, a geek, goofy sort of thing, where he constantly is messing up, but he's super smart. And he's going to be kind of the front and center of all the jokes and stuff like that. But the show is so good at excelling him above that. And every single season, he gets more and more and more to do. One of my least favorite things about season 7 is the fact that he is not in more of the season because of scheduling issues and stuff like that. But beyond that, I mean, what else can you say? He's one of the best characters on the show. May, I'd also put right behind Fitz as probably the second best character on the show. Well, I'll say third best character. May is the second best character for me, just based off of Cavalry, the backstory, her episode in season 2 where we get the flashbacks to everything that happened to her in Bahrain and what she had to go through, and what she did makes her one of the most interesting MCU characters, or just Marvel characters in general. I think she was a little bit uninteresting in season 7 when they brought in the whole empath, emotionless, feels too much sort of stuff. But beyond that, I think every season uses her absolutely excellently. There's a mystery and an intrigue to her character in season 1 that you constantly want to know more about. And then she slowly starts to open up, slowly starts to tell people about who she is and what she's gone through. And then that goes into season 2 when we actually see it. And then in season 3, when she's just leading S.H.I.E.L.D. alongside Phil. And in season 4, when she's sort of working with Mace and stuff like that. It's all great stuff. And I also love when she was paired up with Hunter briefly in season 3. I thought that was really fun. I also just love when the characters get to pair up. One of the most underrated things that May does is after her and Ward get together and then Ward does his turn, we've got that moment in the season 1 finale where Daisy's like distracting Grant and Daisy's like, well, Sky at the time is like, oh, by the way, you pissed off May, and she's really angry, and we get to see May beat his ass. That is so satisfying and so good. I said May probably wasn't the second best, probably the third best, and that's because the second best plot goes to Daisy, in my opinion. I think Daisy is a great character in Sky. I think her transformation throughout the show is right up there along with Fitz as the biggest transformation throughout the show. And while Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. may have seemed at the start like it was Coulson's show and that we were going to be following him and his team, it very clearly and quickly around season 5-ish, I would say, becomes Daisy's show, where you're like, okay, this isn't necessarily Coulson's show anymore. And you can make the argument that in mid-season 2, when we learn about her Inhuman background and stuff like that, that's when it becomes her show. But I think in season 3 and 4, it still clearly favors Coulson over her in terms of main characters. But then in season 5, I think the show starts to favor Daisy over Coulson as the main character, and that continues throughout season 6 and 7, where it's like we see Coulson go through a lot to the point where he's not alive anymore, then he's an LMD, a lot of this stuff. But I think throughout that, Daisy solidifies herself as the main character of the show, and you're like, you realize that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has been her story, and you've been kind of seeing her grow as a person, as a character. And Chloe Bennett's even talked about it in interviews. In a really recent interview, one of the ones I covered on the channel, was where she talked about if she ever thinks she's going to come back as Daisy in the MCU. And she talked about how she essentially grew up alongside Daisy as the character, where Chloe was like, she started out pretty much as a kid playing the character and just grew up with the character. And I think it sort of shows in interacting and in the storytelling that the show goes through, that it's like, you start off with this person who's, you know, she's working for the Rising Tide and stuff like that, and you see serious growth where she is learning who she is and becoming more of who she is as an adult as the show goes on. And I mean, it's pretty hard to beat. I know it's 7 seasons of her story means that 7 seasons of any character would make them better than a couple movies. But I do think Daisy's one of those characters that would extremely benefit from being brought into the movies, because since we have 7 seasons of seeing her become who she is, it will make her appearance in the movies so much better. And finally is Phil Coulson. I'm going to put Phil, I would say Phil is the 4th best character on the show. So I guess this is like 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th. Damn, we almost had a top 10 in S. So I guess Bobby's the 10th best character then is going off of this. I'm not saying this is like legit. I'm well overdue for a rewatch of a show. So I feel like once I do rewatch it, maybe I'll revisit this and switch it around. I'll keep this exact list and be like, okay, maybe this person will shift to here, maybe this person will shift to here. The season 6 characters, for example, I genuinely remember so little about them. Anyway, Coulson, yeah, he's fantastic. What else to say? He's, like I said, that the show becomes Daisy's show after a certain point. It is Phil's show for the first 4.5 seasons, and you really get the feeling like this is sort of what Clark Gregg has been waiting for in the MCU so far, to get something that really builds on him. And I mean, he's an Avenger. Nick Fury says that the Tahiti Protocol was made in the case of the fall of an Avenger. And that was Phil Coulson. It was brought in for Phil because he's an Avenger. I think, you know, he's the one Avenger on this list, really. And I love the character. I think season 4 does a lot of really cool stuff with him, where we're digging into the background with the Superior. I think kind of getting into his background in season 1 with the cellist and all that sort of stuff is really good. Season 2, when he's dealing with the hidden city and the Inhuman stuff and drawing the maps, is so great, where he's going a little bit crazy and we don't know what's going on with them. I think Phil is one of the characters that he doesn't really have a bad storyline. Like throughout the entire show, he's just got great stuff going on. And then in season 5, when the Ghost Rider stuff comes through and it starts to end his story in a tragic way, makes the first 5 seasons this sort of beautiful story of seeing all of that. And also, he's the only character on, well, I guess Mac had Ghost Rider in him at one point. But outside of Mac, Coulson fully had the Ghost Rider in him. That's crazy. Phil Coulson from Iron Man 1 was a host for Ghost Rider at one point. That's crazy. And it was in live action too. Like, I don't know. MCU fans don't know what they're missing by not watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Anyway, this was a long video, a longer video than usual. But how are we thinking about that sort of list? Realize that the camera is probably like in the way of Trip, and covering Davis as well. Yeah. Anyway, Trip is the last one. Davis is the last one on A. But yeah, those are the characters and how I would rank them and where I would put them on their lists. Let me know if you would change things around super much, if these people go where you would put them or if they're not where you would put them. I hope my list isn't super controversial. I don't think it is. I'm looking at this here now, and I don't think I'm seeing like anyone on this list who people are going to be like freaking out and going, how is that person there? Because I'm fairly certain I've heard that Lincoln is also not super popular in the fandom. Piper in C might be one that a lot of people have a problem with, but I can't like see anyone in C or D or even B that I can see people going crazy at me about. But maybe I'm wrong, and if I am wrong, let me know. Like, go crazy at me for it. I want to know what people's opinions on these characters are and where they'd put them. Anyway, if you've made it this far into the video, that's crazy. Make sure to subscribe. If you watch on this video and you're not subscribed yet, I don't know what you're doing, because like that's what 45 minutes almost of talking about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. characters. Where else are you going to find this today? You know, we're keeping the show alive somehow. I don't know. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to like, make sure to share, make sure to do all of that, and have an amazing day.